Help me settle a debate. How does a game start you at 0? You see, I love games that start you with nothing. Recently, my girlfriend and I got into a conversation-turned-argument while making dinner, talking about what games start you with the least. The reason I love games like this is because I play them to remind myself what I'm capable of. She's firmly in the camp that these games are a miserable experience by design, and that only a masochist like me could enjoy them. She's not completely wrong in her assessment, but I'll argue it's not quite that simple. She would happily start a game with everything if she could, but I'd say there are plenty of games that started with less that she still really enjoys. There we go. Now we can just play together as friends. I mean, lovers, or whatever the hell you are. So how does a game give you nothing? Starting with nothing isn't exactly a rare way for a game to begin. Most games are about starting from the bottom and making it to the top. It would be unusual if a game handed you the best it had to offer without making you work for it first. Would that even be a game? Progression is built around the idea of starting small and improving as you grow. The reality is that some games start you with more than others. So how do we even define starting with nothing? Is it as simple as a game giving you no items or currency in the beginning? Even though in Stardew Valley you're given a farm and some rusty tools to begin with, the land is still derelict and it needs plenty of work put into it. What about if the game withholds knowledge from the player and expects them to learn through trial and error? Don't Starve doesn't offer any kind of tutorial or direction, and is completely content letting you be killed by the darkness your first night playing. First, perhaps we should look at the game that got this whole dinner conversation rolling in the first place, RimWorld. There I am, with absolutely nothing. For those who haven't gotten absorbed into this game before, the premise is pretty simple. The default scenario follows a group of 3 that crash land on a mysterious RimWorld and have to survive long enough to build a ship and escape. Along with the 3 colonists, there are a handful of supplies and weapons that give you a nice foothold as you find your place in this strange new world.
I have a Yorkshire Terrier.
My brother and I always loved playing one of the alternate scenarios called the Rich Explorer. In this one, you start with a single colonist that has pretty good starting supplies, with the caveat that they have to do everything by themselves. We'd always pick the same world seed and crash land at the same coordinates, so it always came down to our one colonist and how well we were able to take care of them. That is a lot of yayo. Holy shit, there's a lot of yayo. That is a lot of yayo. Without a doctor, you have no choice but to self-tend wounds. So things as simple as a cut or scratch could be the end of your colony, if not for the glitter tech medicine you start with.
30 Glitter World medicine?
So fast forwards to the beta 19 build of RimWorld, and a new scenario was added, Naked Brutality. Warning, there's nothing fair about this scenario. It's extremely difficult and death can happen for any reason. It's my cup of tea. My brother and I usually refer to it as the Poor Explorer because it's essentially just the Rich Explorer but no food, materials, weapons, or even clothes on your back. It truly is starting from 0.
Are you just chopping a tree?
Yeah. He's so close, Taryn. Been sitting here for like 5 minutes. Like I mentioned before, with only one colonist to work with, if anything happens to them, your colony is pretty much on life support. The lack of food makes foraging and hunting essential, but the lack of weapons or clothes means that getting hurt becomes that much easier. Without any starting medicine, you're always one injury away from the end of days. Not being able to cook is going to be a major setback. Maybe it's just the masochistic side of us, but it didn't take long for Naked Brutality to completely usurp the Rich Explorer as our favorite scenario. Talk about an accomplished colony. All this starting from nothing? Gotta love it. The thing is, my girlfriend won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. She'll play Rich Explorer until the sun doesn't shine, but Naked Brutality is a step too far.
Man, we have very different starts.
When we first started dating, I was helping my girlfriend move into her new apartment. I was carrying what felt like the 10th box up 3 flights of stairs when I asked her what all this stuff was. Her mom pulled me to the side and explained that Taryn doesn't necessarily need these things. She just takes comfort in knowing that they're there. This is reflected in the way she plays RimWorld. Her mentality is to stockpile as much as she can in preparation for disaster.
God, I love this game.
Damn, you've already got a lot of work done on a house, huh? She never knows when the AI storyteller is going to drop a catastrophe in her lap, and she wants to be ready for any occasion. Starting with nothing takes away her peace of mind and doesn't provide her with a safety net while she finds her footing. This isn't a uniquely RimWorld problem for her, but given the option, she'll always lean towards what gives her the best chance of survival.
I think it's over.
So much for the Yorkshire Terrier.
How did you, naked with nothing, beat me?
Slow and steady wins the race. All that said, for all intents and purposes, RimWorld's toughest scenario does a pretty good job starting you damn close to zero. Good morning, boy.
What a beautiful morning.
What are you doing there? Cloud watching. Well, that's nice. You gotta make the most when you have nothing, right? By far, the most common genre of games that came up when talking about starting with nothing was the survival crafting genre. The crazy thing is all these other games start you in your underwear and then Rust just fully commits. On paper, this makes complete sense. Progression in a survival crafting game is all about finding and collecting new resources to build and create new tools and equipment. Even though the heart of the journey is in making something from nothing, many of them make concessions by starting you with at least something. Be it a pickaxe or some basic clothes, most survival crafters don't drop you into the world at absolute zero.
The safety in me is like,
Although this is the case, my girlfriend made the point that you still feel like a zero in these games. A game like Raft may be generous enough to load you into a fresh save file with a starting hook and a 2x2 piece of floating plastic, but even then, you still feel like you have nothing. If you aren't wise about the durability of that hook, then you're going to be diving into the ocean for all your crafting materials, and at the mercy of the shark. In 7 Days to Die, you've got some food and water to get your zombie apocalypse started, but unless you pick up wood and craft a club before dark, you're gonna have a whole lot less than 7 days to die. When we play these games together, we notice that anytime there's a hunger and thirst meter, it's a mad panic to figure out how to get food and water before we reach our expiration date. It's an incredibly helpless feeling, even with some starting calories, because once you run out, you're on your own to find a reliable source. Delicious lizard meat. There's a persistent hourglass in the form of the hunger meter, and it's always looming over you from the corner of the screen. If it's your first time playing, then you especially feel at zero because the world feels foreign and scary. However, the need to feed is sometimes just the push required to get you to dive into the unknown. Oh, he got me. Subnautica might be the best example of this from personal experience. Not only are you a fish out of water on planet 4546b, yes, pun intended, but you're managing food, water, and now oxygen. Oh, am I gonna make it? 6 seconds? Ooh, just barely, Tam. Whoa, oh my god. That stalker came after me, Tam. This means that every excursion into the depths has you leashed thanks to your pesky need to breathe. The first time I loaded up the game, I had no clue what was dangerous out in the water. Every single venture outside of the life pod was riddled with fear that it might be my last.
It's funny because having played this game before, I'm like, yeah, I'm in the shallows, I am safe.
Yeah. It's a very different experience your first go around.
First time around, I'm like, what's that noise? What's that noise? What's that noise?
As much as I would have liked to sit cowering in the corner waiting for rescue, the imminent danger of running out of supplies forced me out into the unknown. It's nice they put you right next to the kelp garden. It looks so spooky the first time playing, but it's actually like one of the safest areas.
Well, it's because you go in and then that whole area is like tinted yellow.
The kelp garden? It's green. But I see what you're saying. As soon as the color grading changes, I get stressed.
Yes.
My girlfriend's experience was much the same way. Even after she worked up the courage to leave the safety of the reef, it still took time for her to feel comfortable in this new world.
Oh, I died.
What? How did you die already? After finally accumulating enough resources to make a base, she ludicrously attempted to build it above the water because she still hadn't accepted her new life was below the waves.
How the hell do I get in my base?
This is to say that even though you start the game with a wetsuit on your back and food in your pack, you still feel naked and afraid thanks to the harsh world around you.
30 seconds.
It's crazy how much your progress is hindered early on when you have to like go up and breathe.
Every other second.
Yeah, because you do anything, you get to where you want to go, and then it's like, breathe, oxygen, and it's like, okay, and then you like get lost trying to go back to where you were, and by the time you get back, then you have to breathe again.
That uneasy feeling never quite goes away, even after conquering every corner of the oceanic planet. Once you're decked out in a fully modded up prawn suit, exploring the deepest recesses of the ocean, it might seem like nothing can shake you. However, there are still those moments where a warper will rip you from your rig and leave you feeling just as helpless as the day you crash landed. Even though you're a seasoned diver at that point with tons of shiny new equipment, you can't ignore that tug of the leash around your lungs while frantically swimming back to the safety of your mech. Although the survival crafting games don't start you at absolute zero, I agree with my girlfriend that they still manage to instill a feeling of being a zero. It's not necessarily about the things you have or the things you don't, but more the icy shock of dipping your toes in before committing to a full jump.
Houston, we have a problem.
Abandoned ship.
Abandoned ship.
Once you establish yourself and get a roof over your head, that vulnerability tends to go away. But what about a game where there's no guarantee you'll wake up to a home the next time you decide to play?
Oh boy, 3 a.m.
We can't talk about games with harsh worlds without bringing up a game like Rust. As soon as I brought up naked brutality in RimWorld, my girlfriend immediately mentioned Rust. On paper, it's a pretty absolute zero experience. Waking up completely naked on the beach with nothing but a rock in your hands is pretty low. But then there's the added layer of complexity that you're surrounded by other naked players all trying to get a leg up on each other. Oh, you spawned where I spawned the last time. Rust is interesting because there are a couple of different experiences you might have. On the one hand, there's the equal footing experience. This is what the two of us call it when a server freshly wipes and everyone's starting from zero at the same time. In an ideal world, this would be everyone's experience. Unfortunately, ever since we became working adults, we fell into a new category of Rust players. The ones who wake up on the beach and immediately get headshot. Starting from zero means you can't go any lower, but the thing about Rust is that the ceiling only gets higher. When joining a server late, you truly are starting your experience with your shoelaces tied together. Yes, on the one hand you have a rock and torch, but that does pretty much piss all the players running around with AKs and bolts.
Okay, so I bought 2 revolvers.
Being at the bottom of the food chain is tough enough, but competing with other established players can feel downright impossible. Not only are you having to fight tooth and nail to stake your claim, but other players with plenty of advantages are doing their best to keep you at the bottom.
Ooh, there's a mini bike.
Let's go. As unforgiving as the game is, some of our best memories with it are those times where we start from nothing mid-wipe and claw our way to glory regardless. Damn. Holy shit, okay. Crashing on the mini bike kills you.
Did you just die?
Yeah. It can feel so demoralizing getting stomped on the second you open your eyes on the beach. But it makes it feel that much sweeter when you finally do make it somewhere. God damn it. I was going so fast. Oh, I'm so far.
I'll get the bag.
When we load up Rust after a long break, we're fully anticipating a headache of an evening. But we succeed often enough that it always has us coming back for more.
Or just following this road.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a long one though. My girlfriend's argument for why Rust is great at starting you with zero is that it's a game where you're always at risk of crashing back down.
There's literally a bear by the horse.
Something unique about the Rust experience compared to other survival crafting games is that starting out isn't your only time at rock bottom. Yes, in those other games you can die, but making a corpse run to get your stuff back is a lot more forgiving than what you find in Rust. Are you kidding me?
What?
I just spawned on a polar bear? Oh my god, this game. Something as simple as a fight with another player, or even just being in the wrong place at the wrong time is all it takes. If you give them a reason, players with a vengeance will make you their target and raid your base when you aren't around to defend yourself.
We're the vengeful ones now.
One evening, you'll be on top of the world, only to go to bed and wake up the next morning, back at square one with nothing left but a rock and torch. Okay?
Nice.
Oh, damn it. I knew it. Yeah. Not much we can do about that. Yes, you just lost everything, but you've been here before and already proven that you're capable of making something of it. If you play for long enough, you're bound to have several brushes with zero throughout a wipe. But for as many wipes where we've thrown in the towel and called it quits, there have been those where we dust ourselves off and end up making it further than ever before.
Hello there. I like our camp. It's basically everything that would be in a base, just without the walls.
It's a base without a base, exactly. Talking about the zero to hero cycles of Rust got the two of us thinking about another genre of games that we will forever be at odds on. Oh, what the hell? What's going on with the baby?
He is expressing how pissed he is.
Why is he hungry?
I don't know. Did we give him breakfast?
We would have known if we hadn't given him breakfast. That cat does not stop meowing.
That's true.
The roguelike genre is hotly contested in our household because my girlfriend can't stand permadeath. However, there's certainly something to be said about these games in a conversation about starting from nothing. Repetitively returning to zero is literally baked into the bone structure of any roguelike. In death, you lose all the progress you made towards your objective. However, as a player, the knowledge you accumulated can never be taken away from you. To some extent, the accumulation of that knowledge is in and of itself playing the game.
Oh look, my jacks are permanently upgraded. I didn't realize that's how it worked.
In a game like The Binding of Isaac, much of the skill comes from understanding how the game works. Although you unlock items and upgrades by playing the game more, equally as important is understanding what these power-ups do and how they synergize with one another. For as many great items as there are in the game, there are also awful items that you want to avoid lest you make your run even more difficult.
Go on without me!
Oh my god!
Even though these games ask you to start each new run from scratch in a brand new procedurally generated dungeon after dying, the know-how of dealing with certain obstacles or threats is what allows you to make it further than the time before. The lowest you'll ever feel in a roguelike is the beginning of your journey with it, and the first run of a new game will always be the roughest to get started. Repetition through failure is at the core of these games, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone that won on their first try.
I'm not complaining. Oh my god, and the queen is gonna... The foil card. Watch this. That should do it. Yeah, that did it. They just handed us 3 straights. We won!
The reason my girlfriend has a hard time stomaching this genre is because of how she internalizes failure. There are no second chances. The games are very clear that they expect you to do everything over again should you fail. To her, the thought of having to do it all over on another attempt is exhausting, where for me, I find the prospect invigorating. But this is how you act in every roguelike you've ever played.
What do you mean?
You run around screaming like this. The best real-world comparison we came up with together was literal running. My girlfriend would prefer to run in something like a 10K, because although long, it has a set amount of distance, and she understands where the start and finish is. There's no doubt she'll make it to the end as long as she continues moving towards the finish line. Meanwhile, I'm the type of person who likes to throw my shoes on and just start running with no destination. I just want to see how far I can go. All in the calves, Taryn.
Damn!
Think of the 10K as something like a Souls-like. There are stretches that are challenging where you may need to slow down and walk for a bit. These are the bosses she gets stuck on for days at a time. As long as she keeps trying, she'll always move closer to the finish line. Roguelikes are a lot like my way of running. You go as far as you can in one round and that's that. Once you can't run anymore, the run is over. There's no coming back to where you left off. Instead, you start a brand new timer and go again.
No!
Knowing that, you may see why from her perspective, every single run in a roguelike that ends in death feels so bad. If she's going to sit down and sink her afternoon into a game, then she needs to see a tangible sign she's getting closer to her goal. Every time she boots up a roguelike, she'll tell you she feels like she's starting from absolute zero.
I walked in and I was like, I don't know what's a good guy and what's a bad guy on the screen right
now. That's kind of
now.
the problem. I'm hemorrhaging health because
You're like, what's even on my team?
I don't even know what is safe and what isn't. My argument against her claim is simple. When the two of us initially picked up Risk of Rain 2, it was to play in a group with our friends. They absolutely carried us to victory, and we beat Mithrix every single run we went on with them. It got the two of us thinking we were actually good at the game. But boy, were we wrong. No, what killed
No,
me?
the laser on that robot.
Oh, I didn't even see it happening.
There was so much bad shit.
It's all good. We got humbled pretty hard the first time we booted it up and played just the two of us. Making it to the end of a challenge in a game like this doesn't necessarily mean you've figured things out, nor that you've risen above starting from nothing. Without accumulating any knowledge, you'll always start from zero at the beginning of each fresh run. This is the one I recognize.
Yeah, I know this one.
With zero as a baseline, I take comfort in knowing that in roguelikes, from the second you press start, it's only up. I'll argue that you can never sink lower than the bottom. When you lose, you learn. 3 coins. Is that a sign that we should go to the shop? Help the game help us, you know what I mean? But that opens up a completely new conversation. What about the games that start you below zero? Plenty of games give you the option to hinder yourself in some way. Starting with nothing is only one way, but sometimes you can start even lower than that. In Zomboid, there exists a scenario known as the CDDA challenge. Today's definitely not your day. For the uninitiated, Zomboid is a sandbox survival game taking place in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. On a normal start, you wake up fully clothed in a healthy, safe, and secure place. In the CDDA scenario, you get out of the shower and fall badly. You're blind drunk and have a nasty cold. On top of all of that, the house is on fire. What a day to have a zombie outbreak.
That sounds so fun.
As my girlfriend put it, the game is hard enough for her to survive at baseline, let alone with a shard of glass lodged in her crotch preventing her from running.
I'm not good at the start of Zomboid anyway.
Since she's got a cold, she keeps sneezing every few seconds, which creates noise that attracts more zombos.
I'm just limping away. Oh shit, I'm sneezing.
Yeah, because you're sick.
Oh god, the zombie's coming. We're going. I'm sneezing and running.
This scenario sings to those of us who love feeling the burn and facing improbable odds of survival. Apply bandage to groin. Okay, that's all I have time for. It's time to go. I consider myself the type of player that relishes in overcoming insurmountable situations like this, and it should come as no surprise that I've had some fun with the scenario in the past. I know, it's like the shittiest spawn, right? But I like to try.
I'm glad you know what you like. I do too, and it's not this.
The primary challenge of the CDDA challenge is undeniably its start. Once you're established and have survived the first few months, it can get kind of stale since it's just a normal Zomboid run at that point. You undeniably start well below zero, but the climb out of the negatives is part of the draw.
This is the biggest horde of zombies I've ever seen.
There's something fun about waking up in a literal nightmare and finding a path to salvation.
I don't think this is working. I'm not good enough at the game for this.
It speaks volumes to why we enjoy games that the prospect of doing something so ludicrous thrills me with the idea of how I might play under those circumstances. The sneeze is worse than the groin injury.
Yup.
I love it. In a world filled with self-restricted challenges and games, starting with less than nothing has never been more appetizing. Time to go.
Time to go. But damn, I'm impressed.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much time,
No.
but
I'm impressed.
the shoes honestly might be what we need because I can walk a lot faster with the shoes and
Okay.
bandage. See, I'm not injured anymore.
Wow.
We spent a lot of time discussing the ways a game starts you with nothing. My girlfriend remains firmly in the camp that starting with nothing should come down to the physical items you have in your inventory. Whether that be some starting tools in Terraria or the literal clothes on your back in Valheim, to her, something is better than nothing. What the hell kind of start is this?
Okay, that's a load of bullshit.
This isn't even like, I don't even have a chance of surviving this. One of the last games we talked about was Minecraft. It fits her description reasonably well because your inventory and armor is completely empty from the start. Every new world begins the exact same way, punching down a tree with your bare hands so you can make your first set of tools. Every block in the game is breakable with your bare fists, with the rare exception, but collecting resources is much faster with the right tool for the job. With that being said, collecting resources is twice as fast with another simple upgrade. One you can get right from the start of the game, even starting at zero. A friend.
Hello.
As we learned today, starting any game from scratch is an uphill battle. Whether you're overcoming fear, starvation, or even rival players, it can be tough to find your footing. Getting up off the ground is a much different experience when you have a companion along for the ride. Just think about how much more you can accomplish in a game like Minecraft when working with your friend as a team.
Thank you.
In the beginning, I made the claim that when a game starts me with nothing, it reminds me what I'm capable of. Starting with a friend doesn't take away from that feeling. It just emphasizes how much further we can reach by relying on each other. As bullheaded as I like to be in my personal life, always trying to do everything all on my own, playing cooperatively reminds me that it doesn't need to be that way.
There's just something about Minecraft.
Letting someone have your back every now and then makes the climb to the top far easier than going it solo. You may be naked and afraid, but you're not at zero with your +1.
What are we gonna build?
Right now we're building a cave. This video was a lot different than what we usually make, but my girlfriend and I have discussions like these all the time. Over the past couple of days, we kept circling back to this one and finally thought, why not make a video out of our conversation? We've played and made videos about each and every one of the games we talked about in this video. We'll link them down below, so you'd be surprised how often they come up in our day-to-day chit-chat. Anyways, if you liked this or found it interesting, let us know down below because we'd love to hear your takes. In the meantime, dinner's done cooking, so I guess it's finally time to eat. Catch you next time.